Welcome to Future Skills Ireland podcast. I'm Shauna Dunlop, the Director of Future Skills Needs and Solace, the further education and training authority in Ireland. I'm delighted to be bringing this brand new podcast to Ireland, which has a real focus on not just the skills that matter for Ireland, but also we hear from people who tell us their real stories about their journeys and the skills that mattered most to them, all with the singular purpose of starting a new national conversation on skills in Ireland. I am joined today by my co-host, who's my colleague in Solace, Mags Byrne. Mags has actually done a lot of work already in terms of bringing real life stories about people and learning in further education and training out in her very well known Mags is Mags. But I'm really delighted to welcome our very special guest today, Senator Lynn Ruane. So Senator Ruane, as many of you will know, has done absolutely pioneering work in terms of education and making sure that young people in particular are supported. She has a real passion for making sure legislation is right and also has really, really brilliant ideas in terms of lifelong learning for Ireland. So you're very, very welcome.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks
welcome,
for having
Lynn.
me.
And great to have you on board as my co-host today, Mags.
Thank you, Shauna. And it's great to have Lynn here, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes. We're delighted. We're delighted, Lynn, because we're hoping that we'll be able to ask you a little bit about your own story.
Yeah.
We know that you shared a lot of your own experience, and you've taken obviously a lot of that into your role as a senator and as an author, and a lot of the other work that you do in the communities. So we'll maybe just start, and the whole point of today is to get us thinking about future skills, but we want to do that in the context of our own stories and what that means for our society, for the communities that we're from. And I suppose one of the areas of skills that's really relevant to the three of us as females as well, sitting around this table, is what skills maybe you think have been very important to yourself, in terms of your own journey, really.
Yeah, I mean, my story is there's so much in it, and there's so much now with a kind of, as a 40-year-old woman now, being able to analyse your skills over a period of time or analyse your life. And I think being able to see that stuff that I thought were maybe negative characteristics as a young person turned out to be actually my most powerful skills.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? And I grew up in Kilnarden and Tala, and loved learning, loved reading. My mum taught me to read at a very, very young age. Mm-hmm. I'd say I was 2 when she said I was flying through the Ladybird books, and we didn't have the square at the time, so you had to go down to Kilmanagh, to Duns and Kilmanagh.
Right.
And you'd go on the little local link bus, and she used to have to buy me a new every week. She said, I'd gone through the book. So by the time I was starting school, I was already very engaged with words, and I think that being able to have that skill and being able to learn how to read, because obviously, other people will learn in different ways and other people will have difficulty learning to read. So it's not that the reading itself is the only necessary skill in terms of literacy, because people can obviously learn to orate and have different imaginations and draw and find other ways of communication. But for me, reading was extremely important. And I think that skill, not necessarily at that time, but that skill became very apparent as something very important to me as I grew older, because ending up then having quite a negative experience later on of education, being out of school by the time I was 15 and not really engaging in school from the age of about 12 to 13. So kind of there wasn't really any schooling in those years either, even though I might have been still showing up every now and again in the classroom. And my relationship with education became quite fraught. But I wasn't afraid of language and I wasn't afraid of words. And I think that helped me because I had no formal education really then, or no second level formal education. So I was able to then, when I needed to understand something or know something, I was able to go and figure that out. And I wasn't, even if I didn't understand what was on the page, because I have, there's so many people over the years that I worked with or supported or, are friends with, and it can be quite daunting if you see a form or a certain thing that you don't understand, and you can just kind of go, I can't, the anxiety it brings up on you. And these things can be quite hard. So I think that skill helped me, being able to engage with words and thinking at a very young age. But also then there's other skills that would have been seen as quite negative. So like I would have been, well, I'm going to call them skills now. They wouldn't have called them skills then. So I would have been seen as quite disruptive.
Okay.
And I suppose how that was framed to me at the time was that, is, basically not staying quiet in the class, like, So it was this constrained idea of what an educational setting should be.
Okay, yeah.
That lacked dialogue or lacked query. But then I went on to study philosophy in Trinity, where I could engage in dialogue and query and inquiry and, like studying the likes of even like Socrates in the beginning when I first went to Trinity Access Programme and realising that kind of dialogue was welcomed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was really powerful for me because I was like, God, I'm glad I didn't let that be battered out of me. I'm glad I kind of pushed past that. But I pushed past that, I think, with another skill, which is a level of defiance. And so it's like, well, then it's also figuring out what's a skill and what is a characteristic. Do you know what I mean? So there's you could have a whole conversation about that. Is that a skill? And I'm going to say it is a skill to kind of push back in the face of an institutional desire to make you conform to a particular way of being or, and I think, and the reason why I want to say it's a skill, because then it can be developed in anyone.
Yep.
That ability to stand up. Because if you say if it's something innate in an individual, you're kind of individualizing the ability to be able to work in certain spaces or engage in particular dialogue or have particular conversations or challenge and ask questions, And I think if we make those individual skills, it removes the ability of collectiveness to be able to make change in certain places, do you know?
Yeah. So it's clear, that love of words that you have, that was there very early. And then, I think the way you've told your story there, it's almost like curiosity.
Yeah.
Do you know,
I was the why child. Why? Why?
Yeah. And funny that is our theme that, we keep coming back to, actually, the curiosity, the imagination, and then, the defiance or the challenge, and how that has obviously served you and so many of the people who you've helped and who you've represented as well as a senator. So those are that's very clear, in terms of the skills that you have.
And I think what's important as well is the skill to recognise when it's safer for you to be the challenger.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because obviously, even though I believe everyone can develop the skills to navigate most spaces, people's living conditions or environments may not be supportive in the sense of them doing that. So it might be unsafe for someone to keep challenging or to keep pushing back because of other factors in their lives.
Of course,
not because they don't have the capacity to, but maybe they don't have the structure around them to make sure they're safe in that. And I think a good skill to always know is that sometimes in a room, even of your own peers, you may have a slight more privilege or advantage so that you can kind of step out with the collective endeavour in mind. Do you know what I mean? And I think that can be a skill as well to kind of go, who's best to challenge now and who's not, and who should you mind in the process? But you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's very important, actually, isn't it? In knowing when not to take the lead on something, or when to let someone else maybe come in and bring their words or their actions as well.
Exactly.
And I think Mags, has the next question for you now, maybe in terms of kind of where we're going. But I know that we're interested kind of in, the different, maybe the different ways in how the Senator has influenced you as well, Mags, I think.
Yeah. No, I've been dying to meet you for years. You're just really an inspiration to me, and everyone I know, we just love you. And I was on to Shauna saying we need to get Lynn in because you're you don't really know how much you inspire people. But as I said to you before, what is your drive to go from that destructive little child in Kilnamanagh to Kilnarden, to go to Trinity College and the Trinity Access programme, and then to end up in government? What is that fire within you?
I think there's probably various things, and sometimes I will emphasise some more than others. But I think what's been true for me, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, especially the last 2 years, is I was diagnosed with ADHD in the last 2 years, and I've started to reevaluate lots of my ways in which I navigate the world through this new insight, in a really positive and empowering way, because it removed the self-loathing. So the things that I'm probably, you know, when I would crash with burnout because I'd work at such a high level for a long period, and then I'd be like, can I just go to bed for 4 days? But during them 4 days of complete trying to like slow the mind and, you know, just watch crap on the telly, then I'd be beating myself up for that. Do you know what I mean? Going, what are you doing? Like, get up and like, you know, so all that self-loathing. So now I allow myself all those kind of spaces. But I've also started to look at my engagement with that drive. That is it ambition? Is it drive? Is it determination? And it's so hard to say that it's either one of them, because I have so many friends and people that I love and communities that I champion that also have many of those qualities, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, how do those qualities then engage with the system? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, well, I'm not any more determined than some of my friends. And we all have skills, and we use them in them same skills to even just survive. Do you know what I mean? Or, you know, some of my friends have many kids, and they're making sure that they're using their skill set to make sure that kids can finish school, that they're fed, that they have a little job. Do you know what I mean? Where I was using it in a different direction. But I also realised through that lens of kind of hyper fixation that I can get is that I'm really good at getting my teeth into a subject or a topic or an issue. And I seem to have applied that to social justice, you know. So like my interests are, I get bored with stuff that I've no interest in. So I think the determination then comes from if I feel this internal sense of right or wrong, and then it's something that I'm interested in, and you match those two things together, it's actually a really beautiful mix. And I think that's why when it comes to even neurodiversity or, you know, people with any sort of kind of differing way of learning and engaging with the world is, we haven't kind of set the world up to fully take advantage of the skill set and the interests. Do you know what I mean? So if you just had me working on drugs policy for my entire life, the stuff I would get done. You know, but we expect people to go into jobs where they're having to spread themselves across things that they're just maybe not that interested in. You know, so now I'm looking going, well, actually, I had all these kind of skills, I had all these interests, and I managed to find a way to put them together. Yeah. And I'm very lucky to have been able to do that. Do you know what I mean? Because, you know, if I had to work in a job where I didn't have that freedom that I do, like politics suits me, the type of mind that I have. Working in the drug sector was hard because, like, I mean, even though I love the work that I do, I'm not very good with like a board or anything. Do you know what I mean? So I'd say a board might go, yeah, maybe she is a bit disruptive. But so I'm not good with the structure stuff. I'm not good with the process stuff. So being able to find space where I can fully be me and realise my potential in that space is really helpful for me. And I don't think there's enough of those spaces. Do you know what I mean? There's so much if I had to deal with a whole load of bureaucracy just to make a decision about what I did with my next hour, I'd be absolutely miserable. I would be miserable, and I wouldn't be able to conform to it. And I see that now as an adult, and I obviously had that as a child in school, and that's where I struggled. So, you know, people would say, well, you had a problem with authority. And I'm now going, did I have a problem with authority, or did I just struggle with doing things in a way that someone else decided, like, you do this at this time, that at that time, that at that time. I don't respond to that. I get itchy in it. Like I push it away. But it's not about the authority bit. It's actually I'm not interested in doing things that people just tell me I need to be doing. I want to do the things. And that's why with school, like, I mean, the fact that kids have to study 7 subjects and 6 and 7 subjects for their leaving cert and stuff, it's so like demoralising and ineffective. Because no child is going to like spread themselves across 7 subjects in their lives. Do you know what I mean? And you know, it's just not effective. Like, do you know what I mean? So for me, I get to focus on the things that I care about, and that's where the determination comes from. You know?
And I think, I mean, it's clear that you've had many successes, you know, especially in challenging legislation and driving legislation, a lot of those areas you've talked about there, Lynn, as well. But I mean, one of the challenges I think that we have, and you've kind of touched on it in the education world, and as, you know, the practitioners trying to fund, making sure that we're doing our best for people in education is a challenge. You could call it an opportunity, or you could call it a challenge for lifelong learning. And I think the three of us here, I think we're probably all fairly well seasoned lifelong learners and committed to that space. And that's something that a lot of people are. Some people are in that space already, but you know, we've just had our recent statistics that are produced on lifelong learning. So we produce those in Solas, and we have seen that there has been a bit of an increase in how we count it anyway. And there's always something about how you count things. You know, you can always challenge that as well. But there has been a bit of an increase. So 16%, we have a 16% participation rate at the moment for people who are participating in lifelong learning, as we're defining it across Europe. But we have Sweden there who are at 43%. You know, we have Finland who are at 40%. And part of that maybe is the constraints, you know, that we have in the system. Do you know?
People's experiences of school growing up and not having alternative experiences to compare it against. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think when you match it with an environment where we have such, like, I think encouraging people into lifelong learning will become more difficult if you live in a system that has a neoliberal element to it, where it's kind of wants you to be job activated. Job ready.
Yeah.
That's not what learning is about. And I think if we continue to attach learning to job activation only, obviously people need careers and jobs, right? So it's not saying that, but it's like, you know, even community development. I mean, community development and community development principles are nothing about job activation, but yet the state pulled community development in a direction that became about job activation, you know, and became about reducing, you know, numbers on social welfare, you know, when actually learning and agency and autonomy and communities being able to build and be self-sufficient. And people are learning every day in informal ways anyway, and they don't even recognise that they're learning informally. And I think if people realise the skills they're using in their everyday life and how they are what then can be learned and like used in formalised sentence. So like say as a philosophy graduate, you know, I teamed up with Dr. Robert Grant, who was a philosophy lecturer from Trinity, and John Bissett, who is has a doctorate in sociologist, but is a community worker, regeneration and community and stuff like that in Dolphin, Inchicore, Rialto, all of them areas. And we came together and developed philosophy in the community. So taking that concept of, well, people think that philosophy is like this big academic endeavour, where thinking is not an academic endeavour. Thinking is a human condition, you know? So being able to go, well, people critically engage all day long about how they're going to, even the skills they have to use to how they're going to pay their bills. Like people look at drug dealers and go, oh, like why are they? And it's like, well, actually the skill set there is pretty impressive from a social, from an entrepreneurship model and business model and all of these things. So it's like, how do you take all these skill sets? And obviously the environment is not conducive. So they're using them in ways that will probably ultimately cause them harm. But actually they're using a very high level of brain power. And it's like, well, how do you take them into different settings? So the community and the philosophy in the community was to look at, say, like how people are using philosophy anyway in their everyday lives. And engaging with topics like, so like one of the very first sessions we had, now it progressed and it got kind of more deeper as it went on. With the first one we had like residents in Dolphin House, community workers, people in recovery, and people in direct provision. And we had a few different groups, but one of the most kind of persistent ones in Dolphin House, like one of the first questions they looked at was like, you know, what comes around goes around, that as a statement. Like if you begin to tease that out, you know, you start to go into philosophical and people then, you could see them engaging back and forth, or, you know, you get what you deserve. Like, I mean, that moved into like a conversation on class and, you know, people, do they deserve pain? Do they deserve suffering? What is suffering? You know, so there's ways, if you do it well, to translate what people are already doing out of this inaccessible
Yeah.
language.
Okay. Yeah.
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 You know?
That's hugely interesting. You know, the
Yeah.
philosophy in the community.
Yeah.
You know, and even how you've got people to engage with that, because
Yeah.
as you say, you know, maybe many of us would hear the word philosophy and be a bit daunted.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
I'd be
And,
lost.
you know, and, you
But
know,
do it
but
all
it's
day. Like
yeah.
you're doing it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that
Yeah.
you're
You
you're
know,
right the way you've
like
explained
if
it.
we, if we talk about, when we talk about like prisoners, we automatically move into, you know, the right to education, rights. That's philosophy. If you go
Yep.
into liberation, discussing what is liberation, like liberation is not some academic endeavor. It's actually in action of the individual. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, like, does every single thing that you walk around in your daily job or your daily life, you can actually begin to have those conversations,
Yeah.
you know,
I
and you begin to discuss
Yeah.
morality
Yeah.
and liberty and ethics.
Mhm.
You know, if you had a discussion with your friend who's a vegan in a
Yeah.
group, or if you're in a, you know,
Mhm.
you're teaching in a group and there's one vegan,
Comes back down to that, doesn't
people
it?
will go back and
Yeah.
forth on the ethics of animal
Yeah.
cruelty. That's all philosophy, like.
God.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
creating space for
Creating
those
space,
conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's hugely important for our new conversation on skills and
Yes.
future skills, because we do clearly have a challenge there in that, you know, amazing things are happening with words, with education, with philosophy, with, you know, getting people to see their full potential and their, you know, see that there are things that are possible, but we're not capturing that in lifelong learning as we're counting it. You know, it's not within that definition probably. So that's a good thing, I think, for us to think about in the space of future skills. And
But it's also placing it in the context. If people can't live, people don't have a home.
yes,
You can't remove learning from the environmental or the conditions that people are living.
yes.
So it's hard to encourage people into a kind of formalised setting of
Yes.
lifelong learning.
Yes.
If they're going, I just need to go to work because
Yeah.
I am living in a hotel. Like, so it's like it's daunting to think about
yes.
that when you have to compare it
Yeah.
against all of that, because then you're like, oh, I just feel crippled by that. I can't do anything. You know, how do I
Yeah.
encourage people into lifelong learning when, you know, the cost of living is so high?
Yeah, of course.
The cost of your weekly shopping is so high. So how
Yeah.
do you take people away from
Yeah.
that? And I think it's we have to get creative about how we do that and how we finance
Yeah.
lifelong learning.
Yes.
Like the fact that we only give state, like, you know, for if you're going to like full time, you know, university education.
Yeah.
You know, I'd pay people to go to college. Like, I wouldn't be just paying their fees. I would be paying people to go to college. I'd be paying them a basic income.
Yeah.
Especially if they're from communities that have intergenerational.
Absolutely.
You know, I'd be paying for people's part-time courses. Any mother, any single mother or any mother in the country that wants to balance, like doesn't, you know, has not got the option to go to work. Like, we don't pay for part-time courses. Do you know what I mean?
No.
So I think the
No.
state has to also step up and make sure that the endeavours of the likes of yourselves and other places, and Oncasan obviously is a place that I went to, and there's lots of other, you know, community education spaces. And the thing is, we're not actually given the adequate resources to make sure that lifelong learning can be embedded in a very real way that makes sense for people's lives.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's definitely something we need to think about. You know, are we making learning accessible for everyone? Do you know, it's back to that equality space as well, isn't it? Because if we're thinking about the future for people, do you know, there is that thinking, you know, and there is a massive investment that we do get in further education and training every year. But it's, you know, we need to look and see, is it delivering what it needs to?
So I think it's also shifting some of that investment into people's homes so they can engage in the investment that's in the learning.
Okay, yeah.
So it's going, well, how do you invest so that a mother has access to a basic income at the end of the week? So she kind of go, well, I don't have to go and work on that 0-hour contract.
Yeah.
For, I can actually, I'm going to go, like, the state is going to give me a living basic income, not just lone parents or so, like a basic income for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years while I study, while I go to this lifelong learning.
Yeah.
So it's not about the investment in the infrastructure of the learning as such, but
It's
actually
the whole experience,
so that people can engage with what's on offer.
Yeah.
You know?
So it really is, you know, it's back to some of those things that you mentioned as well, that connected space, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so we have to be connected, you know, and thinking about skills and education and learning, because as you said, Lynn, like we could have resources made available through a community centre. Like we're in a wonderful education and training board here, you know, in Dublin, Dunleary, and the podcast studio. But you know, it's how do people get there?
Yeah.
You know, it's the transport, it's the childcare, it's
childcare,
the different environments.
Childcare,
Yes, like you know.
Yeah.
So like with Oncasan, I had childcare on site. Do you know, like, I mean, I put Jordan in our pram in the morning and I walked from Kilnard to Jobstown and I put her into Rainbow House in the most beautiful, amazing setting.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So she's learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's getting psychosocial skills.
Yeah.
You know, she's engaging in art at a very young age. She's engaging and she's singing and she's learning rhymes. And I'm in a room upstairs. You know, we don't. We should like that model should be like across the board in every community where there's a high concentration of a population. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that people can actually engage on site.
Yeah.
You know?
Make it worth their while. Like, you know, you shouldn't have to go into long life learning and suffer. You know,
we don't want it to be something that, you know, there's so many barriers to that. It
should be a positive addition rather than have to trade off on something.
Exactly. So maybe that's part of, you know, the challenge that you're setting us nearly. Do you know?
Well, not
today.
you. I don't know if it's you. I'm setting it to, but
collectively, that is a challenge that we have. If we're going to change, you know, where we are with lifelong learning and access to education and skills and future skills, I think that that's certainly something we need to think about and bring into that conversation. I know it's so hard in these conversations because we could talk all day, but I know we're already starting to run out of time. But I just wanted to ask you as well, maybe what your thoughts might be, Lynn, on maybe one or two of the key future skills that you think we need to have in the country for the next number of years, I suppose, really. Like it's hard to pick them.
Yeah, it is hard to pick them because obviously there's skills that the market will require. So you could answer in that direction, which I tend not to do.
Yes.
But I also don't want it to sound like, you know, also too abstract that like you're not taking into account that you have a change in world, you have a change in climate, kind of all of these things. But I think one of them is critical engagement.
Okay.
And I think no matter what what the market or what the system or what society or what politics or what, you know, the future requires, I think being able to engage critically is hugely important. And I think it's not prioritised really. Like, I mean, I would introduce philosophy modules from the offset in school.
Okay.
Like, I think we should be engaging in philosophical content in terms of being able to actually tease out information.
Yeah.
Being able to read information is so important. And I think there's ways in which using philosophy modules and classes and schools can do that because we have an overly you know, online world.
Yeah.
And if you can't engage with the material that's in front of you in a way that you can know whether you need to look further into what you're reading or do you need to read around what you're reading, you know, I think we're going to become more and more polarized.
Okay.
You know, so for me, a skill set and to ensure that we're not living in this like post-truth.
Yes.
So like everybody is living off opinion.
Yes.
Rather than people living off, well, what is the reality? What is true?
Yeah.
People can still have their opinions.
Yes.
But that shouldn't be what decides certain policies or how we treat certain people or all of those things. So being able to critically engage with information, I think, is a hugely important skill.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's important. And health information as well. Like, I mean, people will be reading online all sorts of things about, you know, their health or how to treat certain conditions and, you know, that, like, where's that coming from? You know?
Source. Yeah.
Like
how reliable is it?
Yeah. You know, and being able to differentiate between sources. What is a reliable source? What's not a reliable source? Or even being able to take information and go and ask a question based on that information. Who do you ask to you know? So it's like information. So engagement information is one.
Yeah.
I think another skill set, if I was to answer it more from a technical perspective or is in terms of computer science. So for me right now, we have an overly biased computer science in terms of, say, the development of AI systems and development of machine learning. So I've read a lot of work from, say, the States and stuff that have used AI and machine learning to make like social welfare decisions.
Okay.
You know, so not having a human making decisions. So, like, large numbers of people in the States were put off their disability.
Okay.
And they're
It's a
and
machine-based decision.
yeah,
Yeah.
and people died. You know, there's an amazing book called it's a little bit easier to read than some of the more intense text around AI. It's called Weapons of Math Destruction. And it's even being used, say, in classrooms in terms of what classrooms are performing better than others, like, and then basing resources based off that. So taking really needed resources away from spaces that is not performing.
No human decision or no human intervention.
Just crude, like, and then so for me, a skill set that is required across a cross section of society, so that you don't only have, say, very well educated men going into that profession, because that's the input of the information, but that you have a cross-section understanding machine learning, understanding the ethics of AI, how it's used, what groups it's used mostly on, and who it's going to mostly negatively impact, because it also has extremely positive purposes.
Of course, yes.
In
And
helping people, like
people
that have any sort of learning difficulties, or, you know, people with disabilities, or, you know, there's reasons why we want to use AI. So this is not a message saying we shouldn't, but it's like, you need to make sure that it's underpinned by good ethics.
It's linked very much into that critical thinking and
they're
analysis.
They're very closely linked.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I would make sure that we are putting in the infrastructure to make sure that we are developing those skills in a cross section. So you have people of all different classes, race, ethnicity, making sure that they are, able to learn and engage and be the people that are involved in developing machine learning if it's going to be used, and making sure that obviously the state doesn't use it in place of human decision.
Of course, so it's used appropriately and relevantly. I mean, those are hugely valuable insights, really. And I know Mags, you did want to get to yourself as an author as well, you know. So I know you did want to ask Lynn about, some of your writing as well.
I've read People Like Us, and your new book that you have out with Mountjoy, and I just think it's brilliant. Like, it was launched. Was the launch yesterday?
So we launch it next week, but we've launched an online kind of access to it at the moment. Yeah. So my first book was in 2018. Now it's mad because 7-8 years ago. So I was like 32, 33 writing a memoir. And I could write another one already, I'd say. But
please do, because your first one was amazing, and it's just I love
writing. It helps me. It helps me formulate my thoughts. It helps me express myself. And I also now, as a politician and a policymaker, I try and use writing to include other voices. So that's the endeavour with the book, with the lads in Mountjoy. Myself and Grace Dias came together. So me as a writer and a policymaker, and her as a dramatist and an activist and an artist, and we merged our skills together to work with the men over a number of years. But in many forms, theatre. They wrote, directed so many of the parts of the book. So for me, it's also using my voice and words, but then, like I said earlier on, when you know when to step aside, how do I create space? So all the men in the book are called Pedro.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So, and they were insistent that their experience is not isolated. So Pedro there might be 10, 15 men represented in the book, but actually Pedro's experience and Pedro's life is representative of many men like them.
Okay.
And it captures a huge part of some of their stories quite powerfully and artistically. And most importantly, the men are writers, they're directors, they're artists, their creativity that they produced these 2 big shows in Mountjoy Prison that we've tried to capture in this legacy piece. And they want then the proceeds of this book to go back into a programme with younger men, because they want to be able to share them skills with younger men. And some of these men don't have access to people looking after them in prison. So the fact that they are insistent, like some of the men are care experienced and stuff. So the fact that they're like, no, we want a legacy piece. We want to know we've contributed because we want to help, And some of these men will have spent they're lifetime prisoners. You know what I mean? So they've had quite extreme circumstances and experiences, and they really want to do no more harm. And as part of doing no more harm is using their experiences in the most positive way possible. And they're amazing. Working with them has completely changed me. Yeah.
Great work
Yeah.
you're doing.
Thank you.
And how do you go about getting that book? Because I really want to.
Yeah, it's in Books Upstairs.
Yeah.
So we partnered with Books Upstairs, which is great. It's online.
Yeah.
On my Instagram, I'm easily found on Instagram. My page is public, and in my bio I have a link to be able to order it online.
They're books that I read. I'm not a great reader, but I love reading books about real people.
Exactly.
And, so I'll definitely be buying it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for doing the amazing work that you do.
Thank you.
I'm a bit starstruck, as you know. I'm like,
well, you're clearly making massive impacts, Lynn, and, as a writer and a mother and, as a great person representing us there, in the Seanad as well, we totally acknowledge your contribution to so many of us, actually. And we're hugely grateful for you for coming in to speak to us today as well. So I'll give you the last word as well. It's very important. So I suppose in that general kind of overall aim that we have for the podcast, this new conversation that we want to start on skills. I mean, you've given us loads of great insights, and lots of really important things to take away. But is there anything that you'd like to finish with, one or two thoughts or reflections or calls to action even, for what you think we need to be really engaging with for the future conversation on skills?
Yeah, I think it's just about all of us realising that people already have the skills required. It's about creating the spaces to use them, and also people being able to recognise and value those skill sets in themselves.
Yeah.
So I think, as a society, we need to not feel like we are giving or teaching something to cohorts of people that don't already have it.
Yes.
And I think that that's really important, because we empower people then to own the skills that they have and the skills that they've applied already to their lives in many, many forms, and that although skills can be beneficial for future employment or careers, that's not the only way that skills are used. If we're going to build a vision for Ireland that's inclusive and that has lifelong learning embedded into it, we need to know that there's all different types of skills and we use them differently, and, not comparing our skill set to other people. I now know that I don't have certain skills, and one of my skills is surrounding myself with people that are better at other things than I'm not. Okay. And it makes my job a lot easier.
Love that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great. It's so good to have your wisdom and your experience and your ideas as well, for shaping the future with us. So on behalf of myself and Mags, thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lynn.